Hello, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to greet you all. I'm in Bogota right now, but as usual, we are here in this Latin American Caribbean region. Now, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ana Stuart Ibarra, the Executive Director of the IAI, so that she can open the event. Thank you. Thank you, Bran. On behalf of the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, it's a pleasure for me to welcome both this Governance Institute in Latin America, the case of estuaries and mangroves. I would also like to welcome our speakers, Juan Carlos Navarro from the Ministry of the Environment, Franco Morales, the Chief of Technical Cooperation at Senacyt in Panama, Dr. Edgardo Diaz Ferguson, Executive Director of the COIBA Station, and Luisa Echeverría from the Simón Bolívar University. The IEA was created as a science diplomacy instrument over 32 years ago. With 19 member countries, we aim to support the nexus between science policy and diplomacy on environmental global change so that our member countries are in a better position to plan and address the main challenges we face nowadays. Extreme climate events, loss of biodiversity, and its impact on increasing social inequality, on health, migration, among other challenges, interconnected challenges. This webinar is organized by our Science Diplomacy Center that aims to support regional conversations, capacity building, networks regarding the best practices on global change, and we want to increase the capacity in our region to use the best scientific evidence, also science and policy tools in order to have a more equitable, healthier, and sustainable continent. This seminar follows the conference organized in Panama in June, co-hosted with COIBA and Senacyt. I would like to especially thank Dr. Eduardo Ortega, the National Senacyt Secretary, also Mrs. Anabela Vázquez from the Senacyt's International Cooperation Office, and Dr. Edgardo Ferguson from COIBA AIP for supporting the June workshop. And you will be hearing about this workshop today. So I hope you have an amazing seminar. Hopefully, this conversation will encourage scientific cooperation and science diplomacy cooperation throughout the region. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your nice words. Now we would like to give the floor to Dr. Omar Lopez, who will be moderating the first block of the first section of this webinar. Thank you, Bran, and thank you everyone to this webinar about science diplomacy and including cases of estuaries and mangroves. In this first section, we have Minister Juan Carlos Navarro, Franklin Morales from Senacyt, and Marcella Ohira, our Vice and Executive Director. Mr. Juan Carlos Navarro is the current Minister of the Environment of Panama. He has had he has done a lot of work towards climate conservation in Panama, especially as he co-founded the national structure for nature conservation. She was also the mayor of Panama, and he has been internationally recognized by his experience in urban development. He's currently the Chief of International Cooperation at Senacyt, and before his role, he worked with the Embassy of Panama in the States, where he focused on strategic topics associated to emerging technologies and value and supply chains. Marcella Ohira is the director of the Science Diplomacy Center at the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, the IAI, where she leads initiatives to strengthen the interface between science between science and science diplomacy and policy. Without further ado, I would like
Muchas
to give
gracias,
the floor
Omar, y
to
muy buen
Minister
día a
Juan
todos.
Carlos Navarro.
Quiero empezar
Thank you
agradeciéndole
so much,
al
Omar. Thank you, everyone.
Instituto
I would like to start by
Interamericano
thanking the Inter-American
por el
Institute
IAI
for Global Change
por
Research,
la
the
oportunidad de la
IAI,
invitación
for this invitation
para
and
estar con ustedes hoy.
opportunity to talk to you
Quiero
today.
agradecerle particularmente
I
a
would like
Ana,
to
a
especially
Marcella,
thank Anna,
a Franklin
Marcella,
de
Franklin
Senacyt y a las
from
personas
Senacyt, and
que nos
also
acompañan
the
hoy en el
people
panel.
that are here with
Eh,
us today in this panel.
para nosotros, este seminario,
This
este webinar,
seminar
no pudo venir
or
en un
this
momento más
webinar
oportuno. Creo que
is
cada día es
very
más
timely
evidente
for us because I
en un
think
planeta con más
that
de 8
it
mil
is
millones de
clear
personas
on a planet
que
with
batalla
over 8
contra
billion people
una crisis de cambio climático.
that we are fighting against a
Un
climate
planeta
change
donde cada vez hay más
crisis.
evidencia de
This
la
is a
dificultad
planet that
de
shows
los
us
países
the
en ponerse
increasing
de acuerdo
evidence of
sobre cómo enfrentar la crisis del cambio
reaching of
climático,
how difficult it is to reach an
a
agreement
juzgar por
regarding how to face
los
climate
resultados
change,
del reciente COP
especially
de
given the
Bakú en
results
COP29 del cambio
of the
climático, del
Baku
reciente COP16 de
COP on
biodiversidad en
climate
Cali en el que
change.
participé
Uh,
personalmente y
the
el COP
the COP
sobre
I have just
desertificación que se está dando
participated
ahora
in,
mismo,
and also the
ni hablar de la
desertification
reunión sobre
COP
plásticos
taking
en
place now.
Botswana,
And of course,
que
the
no tuvo tampoco los resultados esperados.
Botswana
Es
plastics
evidente que
meeting that
cada vez
didn't
es más
have the
difícil, más
expected
urgente, pero por otro
outcomes.
lado más difícil,
It's
que nuestros
becoming
países se
more
pongan de
urgent, of
acuerdo
course, but
a
more
nivel
difficult for our
global
countries to agree
sobre lo que tenemos
globally
que hacer para enfrentar
about what we
esta
have to
crisis
do to
climática
face
global
this global
que
climate
es
crisis
impulsada por la
that is
sobrepoblación, la
boosted by
extinción masiva de especies,
overpopulation, the massive
la pérdida de
extinction of
biodiversidad y el
species,
calentamiento global.
biodiversity loss, and global warming.
Síntomas y a la vez causas
They are
de
both
la
symptoms
pérdida
and
de calidad de vida,
causes of lower
la
quality of
migración
life,
forzada de
forced
cientos y miles y
the
millones de
forced
personas a nivel
migration of
global
hundreds and
y
thousands and millions
la,
of people
el
worldwide,
impacto de esta crisis
and
sobre
the impact
los
of this
derechos humanos más
crisis
fundamentales y
on
las
the
oportunidades
most fundamental human
económicas
rights
de
and
millones de
the
personas alrededor del
economic
mundo.
opportunities of
A
millions
veces
of
en
people
América
around the
Latina
world.
vemos
Sometimes in
estas
Latin
crisis
America,
globales como algo foráneo,
we feel
pero
that
para
these global
nuestro
crises
continente
are foreign to us, but
ya
in
son
our
algo
continent,
directo que vivimos en carne
we
propia.
already see the direct
Solo hay
impacts
que ver la
and
migración
we
que se está
feel them in
dando
the flesh. Have a look
de
at the
manera
migration
irregular,
that is the irregular migration
podría decir
taking place.
ilegal,
I might even
digamos
say
que
illegal
irregular,
migration, but let's
a
say
través de nuestro
irregular
continente
throughout our
hacia la frontera
continent.
sur de los Estados Unidos.
From our continent
Esto ya está afectando a muchos
towards the
países
southern
que nos hemos convertido
border of the states.
no por ninguna
This has
razón
already
propia,
affected
sino
several
en contra de
countries,
nuestra voluntad,
and
como en ruta de tránsito.
we have
Me
become, even
refiero a
against
la
our
migración
will,
durante los últimos
um,
años de más de
the
1.2
transit
millones de
area.
personas
I'm talking
que han
about
cruzado
over
por Panamá
1.2 million
en
people that
camino a Estados
have
Unidos
gone through
por
Panama on
la
their
selva
journey
del
towards the
Darién.
United States
No cualquier
through
selva,
the Darien
por un parque
forest. It's
nacional que ha
not
sido
any
reconocido por la
forest or
UNESCO
jungle.
como
The
sitio de
Darien has
patrimonio
been
mundial
recognized by
y
the
como la selva
UNESCO
del ojo de
as a
agua,
World Heritage
y
Site
que
and
hoy
as a biodiversity reserve.
tiene ríos prístinos y bosques milenarios
It nowadays has
contaminados con más de 2.500 toneladas de
1,000-year-old
plásticos en basura
rivers, clean
y
rivers,
las
but
aguas de ríos
nowadays
prístinos como el río
are
Tupesa
very much contaminated. And
contaminados
the
por
Dupesa
heces
River
fecales,
waters are also contaminated by
erosión,
feces, erosion,
contaminación por basura y plásticos y hasta por
plastic and
cadáveres,
waste contamination,
por
and
esta ruta
even
irregular de
corpses,
migración.
given the irregularity of this
Concluyo diciendo que
navigation route.
para Panamá el tema del cambio climático es muy concreto, muy
Finally,
directo. No
Panama believes that
solamente lo
climate
vemos a
change
través de esta migración
has very direct
complicada,
impact. We see
producto de
it through
factores
this
climáticos y también
complicated
factores
migration
políticos
situation,
hacia
which is the result
Estados
of
Unidos,
climate and political
sino que también lo
factors,
vimos en
this
carne
migration to
propia
the United States.
porque vemos
But
y hemos
also we
podido
can see
presenciar
this
el
because
traslado
we've
de
had
los
to
pobladores de una isla
witness
completa en la comarca
the
indígena de la Marcella,
move
que por el
of
aumento de los
the
niveles del mar
inhabitants of a full
producto del
island
calentamiento global
that had to leave their land because of the climate crisis. And this happened just a few months ago, not even a year ago. Also, we feel this because about a month ago, we suffered the impact of climate events, extreme events here. We lost over 12 people, and the losses amounted to almost $12 million regarding infrastructure loss. And we saw this also last year as a result of extreme climate events. We lost over $1 billion of income through the Panama Canal because of the drought. I'm saying this because all these extreme events, all these issues must be addressed through a solid scientific basis. And to understand these processes, it's essential to have sound science. And this is why this seminar is as important as ever. The decisions made by decision makers every day need to be based on science more than ever and on a solid technical grounds. This is why science diplomacy and the interaction between the scientific community and decision makers will become ever more important and essential in order to make the right decisions to support our countries and communities. I would like to congratulate the IAI. Thank you to the Science Diplomacy Association of Latin America. Thank you. I would like to thank the Senacyt and the people that have made this seminar possible. In particular, Senacyt and COIBA AIP for the amazing work they do when it comes to bringing us closer to bringing decision makers and scientists closer. The ministry is here to support you to keep helping with the IAI initiatives regarding global change and interaction. And thank you for the effort you make to bring us together. I think, Anna, that the leadership of the IAI is truly extraordinary. You open up doors for us and you also promote this interaction. So thank you, everyone. I need to leave the meeting in 2 minutes' time, but I would like to express on behalf of my government and myself the importance of this interaction for us. 10 minutes ago, I talked to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Panama. He's very much aware of the contributions made on science diplomacy. And as the president himself, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and myself and the government of Panama have the doors open. And together with you, they will be supporting science diplomacy as an essential tool so that we do things better every time. Thank you.
Señor ministro, y gracias por esa receptividad a la integración de evidencias científicas para el diseño y aplicación de políticas públicas. Y casualmente ese era el marco de este primer bloque y lo reitero para Franklin, nuestro siguiente
Thank you
expositor.
for all this. And now I would like to say this again, Franklin. What does Senacyt think about this opportunity of being able to include scientific evidence in public policy making? In this case, maybe more focused on mangroves and estuaries, which are the lung of different types of fisheries in our country. Thank you. Thank you, Omar. Thank you to the IAI meeting, to the team, to Marcella and Anna as well. And I would like to echo many of the issues mentioned by the Minister of the Environment.
Hablando un poco sobre Senacyt y el trabajo que se ha hecho
If
con
we're
el
going to talk about the
IAI, nosotros
Senacyt and the
definitivamente
work
tenemos
done with the
la labor
IAI,
que ha tenido
we would like to acknowledge the
Luisa
work
en
done by the IAI when it
haciendo
comes to
con los
promoting
tomadores de
initiatives
decisiones y
that
pues
connect science
desde
and
la
decision
Senacyt pues, se
makers.
impulsó el
And this
trabajo
is why the Senacyt has
que se hizo y el
supported
doctor
the work
Ortega está
done.
comprometido con
Dr.
continuar
Ortega is fully
habilitando este
committed
tipo de
to
iniciativas que pueden
continue
crear sistemas
promoting this
más
type of
para el país
program that
o
might
para un
benefit
poco
our
más amplia,
country
más internacional. Y hay que
and
notar que
also to
Panamá
work more internationally.
tradicionalmente
Traditionally,
temas de diplomacia ha sido el
Panama
centro de diálogo y ese
has
es algo que
been
podemos traducir
a
en cuanto
center
al
for
tema
debates, and it's
de
something
temas
we can also
científicos y es
apply
donde el
to
país puede continuar
science
jugando un rol
diplomacy, how the
para
country
crear esa
can
convergencia, ¿no?
have a
ese
major
enlace entre
role to
distintos
create
países
this
que
convergence and
tenemos problemas
connection
en común
between
y más
countries,
allá de eso que
because we
podamos
have
dar
problems
una
in
respuesta
common,
clara desde
and
la
we need to be
ciencia,
able
desde
to provide
el
a
aparato
clear science
científico
from
a cómo
a
podemos
clear
abordar
response from
estos
science. We need to
problemas.
see how we
Nuestro
can
objetivo en
address these
Senacyt
problems. At Senacyt,
está en este momento está muy
and
enfocado
right
en acercar
now,
la ciencia
we very much focus
a los
of
problemas
on
reales
bringing
de
science
la
closer
sociedad,
to
a los tomadores de decisiones, de
society's
garantizar que el
real
producto
problems
científico que el
in
esfuerzo
order
que se
to
hace es un esfuerzo
guarantee,
concreto, es un
in order to
esfuerzo
make sure that the
que
scientific effort
genera
made
resultados, que
is
ve la acción
specific, it
y
has
que de una
results,
forma u otra
and that
posiciona
in one
al
way or
país
another
en
positions the
dirección
country
al país y a la región en una dirección positiva
and the
de
region
desarrollo sostenible y en
in
una
towards a
dirección
sustainable
que en
development
general pues es
direction,
beneficiosa para nuestros intereses.
which is
Temas como
usually
el cambio
beneficial for us
climático, la pérdida de
in issues like
biodiversidad,
climate change,
la
biodiversity loss,
necesidad de promover la
and the
protección de los
need to
ecosistemas
promote the
humedales y
protection of
estuarios. Estos son temas que
mangrove
más
and
allá
ecosystem,
de un simple
mangrove and estuaries
interés,
ecosystems.
curiosidad científica
This might be
o
interesting
demás,
scientifically
es un
speaking,
tema de
of
interés
course,
nacional.
but it's
Entonces, en
also
este
a
vamos a
topic
afectar la
that
vida a mí,
matters
afecta la
to
vida
the country
de
in
las personas
general,
en la región y
and it
viceversa, afecta la
affects
vida de personas en
the
Colombia.
life of
Entonces,
people
tenemos
in the
eso pues
region.
también como
So
la
we
Senacyt,
are
el
very
continuar apoyando
happy
este
from the
tipo de esfuerzos.
Senacyt to continue
Nosotros
supporting these
movemos
efforts.
el espacio de influencia, de incidencia de documentos como los que están
We
siendo presentados aquí. Creo que
focus on these
definitivamente el
areas.
trabajo es un trabajo que ha sido
Clearly, the work
bien coordinado, diría yo, desde el inicio,
has
en el sentido
been
de que
effectively
nosotros
coordinated from the beginning.
con COIBA AIP ya tenemos
With
experiencias
COIBA AIP,
sólidas
we
de
have
cómo esta
already
evidencia
had solid
científica ha podido
experiences regarding how
impactar
scientific
decisiones
evidence
puntuales.
can impact
Recuerdo que
specific
en el
decisions.
2021
I
ampliamos
remember that in 2021,
las áreas protegidas
we
en
had
nuestros océanos para cumplir con
protected
los
areas
compromisos
in
metas
our
de los
oceans
Objetivos de
to
Desarrollo Sostenible
meet
y
the
con el compromiso de 30 por
SDG
30,
targets
donde
and the
Panamá
30 by
ayudó
30
a
commitment.
proteger pues, más del 50% de
Panama
sus recursos acuáticos.
protected
Y ahí esto pues, fue un
most
trabajo
of its
de la
water
mano con la
resources.
comunidad científica
And
que
this was
aceptó
done together with the scientific community,
la decisión política y eventualmente la decisión
which
de acción,
influenced the
¿no?
political
De
decision
política pública.
and the
Creo
public
que
policy making
la
process.
lección aprendida en
I
ese
think that
momento
the
y la
lesson
lección que
learned
continuamos
and the
buscando
lesson
resaltar es
we
que
want
la
to
ciencia tiene que
highlight
responder a
is
demandas
that
puntuales
science
de la
needs
sociedad.
to meet
Y yo creo
specific
que eso es
society
algo que
demands.
en este caso se ha
And I
logrado, en
think
este
it's
caso se
something
está
that has been
impulsando.
achieved
Creo que
in this
la
case.
presencia del ministro
I think that the
Ambiente
presence
habla
of the
claramente
Minister
del
of the
apoyo que
Environment
tenemos al trabajo
speaks
y
volumes
pues también
about
creo que las
our
palabras del
support
ministro se
for this
extienden
work. And I
a cómo el
think that
gobierno
the
nacional, cómo
minister
Secretariat
also
panameño ve este
um,
tema
would like to
crítico, un
express
tema
also reflects what
definitivamente
the
tiene
Panamanian
una
society believes.
importancia no solo un
This
tema
is
de
a
seguridad
very
nacional
important topic, not only
y protección de
regarding
ecosistemas,
national
sino también
security
es
and
un tema de qué
ecosystem
forma
protection, but
Panamá está
also
liderando
regarding
en temas
how
críticos para
Panama
la región y para el mundo.
is
Entonces,
a
creo que
leader,
eso definitivamente es algo
a
que
global leader
nosotros desde la
regarding
Senacyt vamos a
critical
continuar
issues.
impulsando, vamos a continuar
We will continue promoting this at Senacyt.
habilitando. Aparte de eso, nosotros reconocemos que el
Also,
mundo en este momento está
we know,
enfrentando
we recognize that nowadays the world faces
cambios sustanciales, que el nivel de complejidad en distintos
essential
ecosistemas está
changes,
aumentando, pero
and
también hay oportunidades
problems
que
are
las nuevas tecnologías
increasingly
están abriendo. O
complex.
sea, estamos viendo el
And we
impacto de
see
tecnologías
now the
como
impact
la
of
inteligencia artificial, el impacto
technologies
que
such as
tecnologías como la inteligencia
AI,
sintética van a tener en el mundo
and also
y parte
other
de lo que nosotros
technologies and
estamos
how
en
they
la medida
will
que vamos
impact
respaldando
the
y vamos
world.
impulsando este trabajo
Also, as we
científico,
support
vamos
this
elevando
scientific
capacidades
work,
también,
we are also
capacidades
improving
nacionales y vamos aplicando estas
national
tecnologías
capacities,
para
and we
encontrar
implement these technologies to
posiblemente respuestas que sin el uso de la
find
tecnología no
answers
podríamos
that we wouldn't find
encontrar tan
without
fácilmente. Por
using
eso también
technologies, or
estamos
at least we wouldn't so
desde la
easily
Senacyt bien
find them.
comprometidos a apoyar
And this is why we're also
ciencia
committed
abierta,
to supporting the
entendiendo que
open
parte del
science
esfuerzo también es cómo
initiative, because
aprovechamos
we
la ciencia
believe
abierta.
that
Yo creo que
we
ahí,
need to
y ahí
harness open
definitivamente pues es un
science.
socio clave
I think
nuestro,
that the IAI is a
porque a
key
medida que nosotros
stakeholder in
podamos
this regard,
identificar mayor
because if we can identify
conectar más puntos en esa complejidad, entonces también
more
podemos avanzar
connections within this
de mejor forma el
complexity,
interés de
then we'll
nuestras
be able
naciones
to better
en el
advance
potencial
the interest of
continental
our
y en el
nations
espacio
within the international
continental, y creo que es ahí
agenda, the multilateral
donde y ahí
space.
definitivamente es
I
una
think
palanca
that the
que
IAI
nosotros
is
esperamos
clearly
continuar.
a lever
Lo
that
dejo
we
ahí,
hope
pero
to make the
nuevamente
most of.
reiterar el compromiso de la Senacyt
Well, thank you once again. The
en
Senacyt
impulsar
is fully
ciencia
committed
que
to
tiene un impacto tangible,
promoting
ciencia que es para la
impactful
toma de decisiones,
science
ciencia que puede
that
ser
can be used for decision
realmente
making
trascendental y
and
transformativa
that can really
en cómo estamos en
transform
estos países que
our
son tan diversos
societies and the
temas
situation
que
of
son
our
bastante
countries
complejos para
when
tratar
it comes to
por nosotros.
addressing these
Muchas gracias.
difficult issues. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Franklin. Bueno,
Thank
y
you,
ahora
Franklin.
le damos paso a nuestra
Now we would like to
directora
give the floor to our director
del Centro de Diplomacia Científica, Marcela
of the
Ohira,
Science
para que
Diplomacy
nos
Center,
brinde su
Marcella Ohira,
perspectiva.
so that she can share her
Gracias, Omar.
views with us.
Para mí es
Thank you,
un gran
Omar.
honor y un
It is an
placer estar
honor
con
and a
todos
pleasure for
ustedes
me
en
to
este
be here with
webinario
you in this
y
webinar.
compartir los
And I
resultados
would
que
like
hemos
to share with you
logrado
the
desde el
results that
taller
we
de
have
IAI
achieved after
organizado
this
en
IAI
estrecha
workshop
colaboración con
organized
Senacyt, con
jointly
COIBA
with
AIP y
Senacyt,
otros
COIBA
socios
AIP,
internacionales
and other
estratégicos.
international,
Y el
strategic
diseño, quisiera
international
compartir
partners.
el diseño que
And I
IAI
would like
se
to
está
share
desarrollando
with
con el Centro
you
de Diplomacia
what we are
Científica
developing with the
para
Science
poder
Diplomacy Center
realmente,
to
como
be
dice el
able
taller,
to
construir puentes entre
build
ciencia y
bridges
política
between
y la
science
diplomacia,
and
trabajando
policy
con 19
and
países miembros
diplomacy
en el
by
continente
working with
americano,
19
que
member countries
comparten
in the
muchos de los
American
mismos
continent
desafíos
that share
ambientales
many
a nivel
environmental
nacional,
challenges
regional y
at
global, como el
different
cambio
levels, nationally,
climático,
regionally, and
conservación de la
globally, such as climate
biodiversidad,
change,
océanos,
biodiversity,
entre otros,
conservation,
que son
oceans,
muy
among others.
complejos y que son
These are
también de mucha
complex issues
importancia
and
ambiental,
also
social y
very
económica para
important
todos los
from an
países.
environmental, social,
Pero
and
como ha
economic perspective
mencionado
in
el
any
ministro Juan
country.
Carlos y Franklin
Minister
de Medio
Juan
Ambiente y
Carlos and
Senacyt,
Franklin
realmente el
from
valor de
Senacyt
la
have
ciencia en este hacer
highlighted the
trabajo del
value of
IAI
science when
es
it
cómo
comes
podemos
to
proveer el
the
mejor
work of the
conocimiento
IAI. We
científico
need to focus on
sólido
providing
para
the best
apoyar
solid
procesos de toma de
scientific
decisión. No
knowledge to
solamente la
support
ciencia en sí,
decision-making
pero que
processes.
pongamos
It's not just
propósito de
science
poder servir a los
just
países y a
because,
los
but the
gobiernos de
idea
ambas
is to
regiones,
serve
de
countries,
forma compartida,
societies, and governments by addressing problems that our member countries share. I think that one of the main aspects from the beginning has been to have listen to decision makers, also talk to authorities at Senacyt, the Ministry of the Environment, among other partners, to talk about the main challenges that decision makers have, also what they need to support national and regional public policies, to share good practices with neighbor countries, and also which scientific knowledge is needed. And sometimes also what we know we need to consider, and what we don't know we need to consider in the decision-making process. And this is not easy for a decision maker because it has strong or serious consequences for ecosystems, the economy, at different levels, and also when it comes to transboundary issues that affect neighboring countries. After this first consultation, we learned that COIBA is an amazing natural heritage site, very important for Senacyt and the Ministry of the Environment, but it's also shared with other countries that have major ecosystems, and they provide ecosystems for to our society and economy. So we developed the workshop, and it was held in the city of Panama in last July. It was a 5-day workshop that was very much motivated by scientists and decision makers of the IAI countries. 3 specific outcomes. And not just regarding training, knowledge exchange between scientists, also the exchange of public policies that many governments are already implementing, because they see the weaknesses and strengths of each public policy in each country. But specific outcomes of this process. We produced a white paper with recommendations from science diplomacy, from the solid scientific knowledge we currently have about estuaries and mangroves, and also considering topics such as biodiversity conservation, climate change, and oceans. Mangroves and estuaries are essential in this regard. So the political and scientific exchange took place was very important. The white paper summarizes the content of the workshop so that it's useful for the scientific society, and it also has recommendations to protect these major systems. That was outcome number 1, or output number 1. Number 2, the creation or strengthening of a team of scientists, of a multinational team of decision makers and scientists. They belong to different scientific areas, but there were many people with practical knowledge, many decision makers that have a lot of experience in public policy management, in conservation, and they have common challenges, even if the countries are different. It was very important to create a team like this so that they could contribute their own experience. And this was a huge achievement. And we were able to create a strong team of scientists and decision makers. They applied for international funds, and they have been awarded a seed grant award by the IAI with the participation of Brazil, Uruguay, Panama. This is a project that has been awarded $50,000 to begin with. And the idea is to keep strengthening this science and policy team at the regional level. And even going beyond that, also having a capacity building workshop and also with research ideas to follow up on decision-making processes that are connected with funding opportunities. It's not just about traveling and spending 5 days in a workshop and exchanging information. This involved having specific outcomes and a roadmap to foster, to support science, international collaboration among countries, and also addressing these challenges in the conventions, institutions, universities, and society. And even beyond the capacity building, the SEED project, the idea is to create opportunities so that these initiatives keep becoming stronger. And in this sense, the idea, we wanted to connect this project with larger funding opportunities and to keep working as scientists and decision makers, to include as many countries as possible as well, and to have and to be able to produce more knowledge, to have a better conversation. But it's not just a conversation, it's been going from theory to practice more actively in order to support decision-making processes. Therefore, we also want to connect the opportunity to connect these teams with challenges so that they can apply for larger funding opportunities that fund global opportunities or projects on scientific decision making. There's also the Belmont Forum, which is a global consortium of funders. Currently, they have an open CRA on tropical forests. We did all of this because this has a future. It's not just for this current CRA. In 25-26, there will be another call for oceans, and the IAA will actively participate in this initiative by mobilizing Belmont Forum funds. And in Panama, we held this workshop. We had these 3 outputs. And we can replicate this with other topics, such as oceans, or as the minister said, the topic of migration, which we have addressed in the past as well, migration connected to extreme events. These are topics other topics or events that affect the economy, droughts, floods, and scientific information can really help in this regard. If we have a TD approach, when should I include decision makers, funders, society representatives, so that science can actually support real world problems and decision makers need to act through public policies, programs, science and technology policies, and environmental policies. And the IAI facilitates all this. We invite scientists from different areas. We invite society representatives, decision makers from 19 countries, our parties, in order to get people talking about this and actually implementing different projects and scientific, political, and diplomatic collaboration networks. in the region and internationally. And these outputs can also be included in the conventions of the multilateral world. And every country has different commitments in this regard. The IAI is then a broker between science and policy by promoting knowledge and the application of solid scientific knowledge to support decision-making processes in different sectors. We're here to connect different groups, communities, countries, stakeholders, and sectors. Well, thank you so much again to our partners, the countries, all the decision makers that participated with us in the workshop, design, planning, execution. And we are here to keep working to develop better products, more innovative initiatives that will really bring together science, policy, and diplomacy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marcella. And once again, I would like to thank Minister Juan Carlos Navarro and Mr. Franklin Moreno from the Technical International Cooperation Office, Senacyt. And thank you, Marcella, for what you have shared in this first section. Now I'd like to give the floor back to Bran so that we can go on to the next session. Thank you, Dr. Lopez. Okay, now this is section number 2, the scientific section. Let's call it the scientific section. I would like to give the floor to Ulsía, who is the International Relations Coordinator at DiploCientifica. Thank you, Bran. Thank you, Dr. Lopez, and the panelists who came before me. In this second section, we have Dr. Diaz-Ferguson and Dr. Sija King. I will read the bios before the participants so that I can give them the floor. Diaz-Ferguson is a professional in biology. He has over 20 years of professional experience. He's a Category 2 researcher. He's a professor at the OIT. He is currently the executive director of the COIBA AIP Scientific Station. Dr. Luisa Echeverría King has a PhD in education. She's an international scientific cooperation director at the Simón Bolívar University in Colombia. She's an expert in science diplomacy, internationalization of higher education and international cooperation in Latin America. She has helped shape different innovative strategies by promoting international collaboration and science diplomacy in emerging countries. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Diaz-Ferguson so that he can tell us about the his experience regarding the workshop and the policy brief white paper we are presenting today.
Bien, buenos días a todos. Gracias al IAI por la organización de este evento.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the IAI for organizing this event. Thank you to Senacyt for the support you give to our station. We aim to develop and promote research projects to protect diversity in COIBA, but throughout the Panamanian Pacific and other neighboring ecosystems. A few months ago, we met with the Cooperation Office with Anabela Vázquez and her team to provide information about ecosystems that might need to have the science diplomacy tool in order to translate a conservation theory into specific actions and the effective use of marine coastal resources and the ecosystem services provided by our systems. In particular, we suggested estuaries and mangroves because we've been working on these ecosystems for a long time, regarding basic science such as larvae migration, biodiversity, connectivity, but also we find that these environmental quality values if we use the COIBA Island as a model, might be useful to create quality indices and to increase knowledge of these ecosystems. Nowadays, most of the studies are conducted in temperate areas, in estuaries. In the case of mangroves, in Asia and India, there are many more studies than in Latin America. So, given this background, we are suggesting these ecosystems. And today I would like to tell you about how this workshop came to be and also the outputs developed, as mentioned by Marcella. But I would like to give you more details. So now I would like to tell you about these ecosystems, mangroves, estuaries, which are transitional. There is land and sea transition in these areas, but they also have a lot of population. We need to understand that relationship, and we need to understand why we need to study these areas. TD research is very important to optimize use, sustainability, and governance. Also recommendations regarding the estuaries and mangrove restoration, and also some specific actions and recommendations regarding some of the things we've done to improve our systems. Estuaries are dynamic, complex systems that are created with this transition and mixture between fresh water and salty water. These they have a rich biodiversity, both land and marine, because larvae use high productivity systems in order to breed. And the new larvae need a lot of food during its development. But at the same time, it's a social and environmental system. Communities depend on the system as well. They use the resources provided by the system. And they also affect the system positively and negatively. And there is this transition between education, local knowledge, cultural knowledge, etc. And this needs to be very effective so that the systems can be protected. There are many types of estuaries. Not all of them have mangroves, but the mangrove provides added value because the roots of these mangrove bushes and trees, 16 species in the world, in Panama we have 6 of them, they also create an interesting microhabitat to increase biodiversity in estuaries, and they provide a lot of resources and services. So we'd like to focus on tropical estuaries that have a temperature above 20 Celsius degrees, and that can be found in Latin America from the south of the Canaveral Cape in the Florida until Santa Catarina, up to Santa Catarina, Brazil. And of the 52 Panamanian basins, 34 have mangroves. Mangroves are considered one of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. And they appear in coastal areas and tropical areas in this connection between the land and the sea. They can also colonize different types of soil and provide different types of interaction between organisms on the land and in the water. They are very much in danger nowadays. over 50% of mangroves in the world are about to collapse, according to the first mangrove assessment of the EU, conducted by the UICN, and this environmental balance is threatened. If we look at the conservation list provided by this organization, we can see that in Latin America is nowadays vulnerable, and also Central America and the Caribbean. Therefore, we need to study these ecosystems. We need to try and recover lost areas, especially because 2/3 of the population live there. So we still need a lot more information. There are some critical levels of threats, and we have areas, or we have protected areas, which we can use as a negative control to study the anthropic impact on mangroves, in particular because these are coastal areas. And as Marcella and the minister have said before, climate change has made these areas more vulnerable, and there is nowadays more risk because events like hurricanes are now more commonly affecting the tropical areas. Also, we have different benefits, economic, social, environmental, and ecological benefits. Some services, the exchange of organic matter, conservation of water, volume, cellulose production, scientific and ecological tourism, sustainable fishing. They prevent erosion. They allow us to mitigate climate change because they store a high amount of carbon, oxygen production. They help marine animals breed. Also, they reserve genes that go through, for instance, the Pacific corridor. So it's very important for the mangroves to be protected because they can guarantee the livelihood and resilience of their inhabitants that need to face climate change. Physically, regarding its sediments, they help create specific types of beaches, and they indicate and they reflect the quality of the environment. How can we then ensure that these systems keep providing these services in a sustainable manner? If remember that they are in a critical situation, that they are now smaller, and that the communities need more education, they need better access to the science we conduct just to ensure these services. Therefore, basic science. We need basic science, but also applied science. And we need to use the protected areas as the negative control of anthropic activities to better diagnose, clarify, and implement sustainable practices, and to promote the active or passive restoration in other areas that have been affected. Also, we need to be able to identify potentially new ecosystem services in order to develop public policies and legal instruments that are aligned with a science action plan with a waterland perspective. I'm saying this because many times scientists, I don't know, we focus on the ocean and the coast, and there are others that focus on the forest. And we cannot even agree amongst ourselves. And that's the first obstacle. We need to remember that these are transition areas between the land and the water. So we need to reach the stakeholders that use these ecosystems and that benefit from the services. And we can do this by implementing a TD approach with the participation of the community by providing this local knowledge about the use of the system. And also, we can provide this access to basic science, going beyond local governance. Therefore, we wanted to use Panama as a model, as a living lab, as is the COIBA, to see how anthropic impacts have modified the ecosystem and how we can make sure that we provide these services by restoring or improving the quality of the environment so that these impacted systems can actually have a service level that is similar to that of COIBA, that spent so many years without human intervention. It's a challenge, of course, but it might be a very effective model if we were able to implement it in different ecosystems in Latin America. So our system came up with questions. We didn't know about science diplomacy at the time, but we knew that we need to remember that 2/3 of the world's population live along the coast. We need to focus on Latin America, Panama, and also how we can use physical, chemical data and use research to produce quality indicators and reference frameworks to optimize ecosystem services. But this was not enough because we didn't know how we could share this information with the authorities, because scientists and those who have published material about natural science and exact sciences might feel frustrated because they, I don't know, our work can be published, but then it is not implemented by decision makers. But we want things to be different with estuaries. Therefore, we used the tool provided by the IEI and the Science Diplomacy Center to use it as a bridge to take this science to decision maker and also to reinvent ourselves by including transdisciplinary practices that include local knowledge and working with community leaders and fishers that make it possible for this knowledge to go beyond all this and be used as a new policy. So, assessing the human footprint on these ecosystems using environmental indicators and having a national implementation plan that will become a regional plan for the sustainable use, conservation, education, environmental education on these ecosystems. This is how 11 members from 11 countries came together, from 15 institutions and different disciplines, and thanks to the IEI in Panama. They visited the COIBA AIP station and also the Playa del Estero in Santa Catarina in order to study and understand the human footprint on mangroves, and also trying to set conservation strategies implementing the TD approach. It was very successful because we were able to collect recommendations from different areas and other estuaries that are much larger. For instance, we found out information about the La Plata River in Uruguay and, for example, the Golfo de Nicoya estuary in Central America. This allowed us to interact as colleagues from similar disciplines, but also we were able to draft a document that wasn't a peer-reviewed journal. We wanted it to be used by community leaders, decision makers, or any other stakeholder that might want to participate in protecting ecosystems. And that's how a paper on recommendations was developed for the conservation and restoration of estuaries and mangroves. There are different recommendations. Ecology of estuaries, where we focus on reducing contamination, developing different policies for things like connectivity, but also water volumes, implementing conservation plans for emblematic species, also conservation programs to recover functionality in eroded areas. And in the case of ecosystem services, assessing strategies to improve these services and promoting sustainable productive activities, identifying and assessing different types of services as proposed by mangroves. And in the case of governance, how we use spatial integration to include other social factors, and so that every stakeholder had the same weight in decision making, but also creating local governance frameworks that would go beyond regional governance and might be used throughout the continent. And also continue our cooperation with our countries. Regarding community action, we provided recommendations on roles analysis, also creating different awareness campaigns, working with sustainable communities and protecting the values of the communities that are related to the mangroves, and strengthening the capacity on and building capacity on ancestral knowledge regarding ecosystems. We prepared these recommendations, and I know all of you have access to this white paper. You have access to this in Harvard Access, Google Scholar, ResearchGate as well. But not just that. We started implementing specific projects such as the Seed Grant project, as Marcella said. Different professionals from COIBA AIP, Uruguay, and Univali University, we came together to write a proposal about specific factors to identify key variables for protecting and preserving the sustainability and ecosystem services in 2 areas of mangroves and estuaries in Latin America, because we want to compare human footprint and also suggest a new conservation strategy. Here we can see that areas eroded in Santa Catarina with the Santa Cruz River, and the different ecosystem services, and how we can improve all this by using quality indices and other factors. Also, we need a plan of action not just in Panama, but for the whole continent. In this sense, current quality indices used for mangroves and estuaries are based on physical and chemical variables. And what we need is to assess human impact. We need to study physical, chemical factors, but we should also study trophic structures within these ecosystems as indicators of environmental quality and cleanliness of these areas, and then use these indicators in other areas that have been more affected. I think that science diplomacy has brought us together as a research team, and it has allowed us to solve specific questions that will have specific solutions. They started in Panama, but hopefully we'll be able to keep working together to implement this throughout Latin America regarding the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of the ecosystem services provided by mangroves and estuaries. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Diaz-Ferguson. Before I give the floor to Dr. Echeverría, I would like to invite you to, if you have any questions, please write your
para que al
questions in the
finalizar la
chat so
exposición de la
that
doctora
at
Echeverría
the
aquí
end
podamos
of
darle respuestas a las
uh,
mismas.
her presentation, we can
Doctora
answer your questions.
Echeverría King, en su
Dr.
experiencia, ¿qué
Echeverría King,
características
in your
deben tener los documentos
experience,
científicos orientados a la toma de decisiones para ser
what can you
efectivos
tell
y
us
generar
about
un impacto
the
real en el desarrollo de las políticas
decision-making
públicas?
centered scientific document in order for them to have a real impact on public policy making? I'm sorry, her volume is really low. I'll try to do my best. And this is something that we need to harness. In particular, we need to understand what our influence is as scientists. I'm sorry, it's really low.
Pero cuando nos metemos ya en estos ejercicios, cuando empezamos a trabajar en esta interfaz ciencia, diplomacia, relaciones internacionales, entendemos también el nivel de influencia que alcanzamos. Me dicen que se escucha bajito, no sé si todos me escuchan bien.
Se escucha bien.
¿Sí? Ok.
Yo escucho muy bajito, casi no se escucha, está bajito.
Está bajito, Luisa, o si puedes hablar más fuerte o se escucha bajito.
Ok, bueno, voy a intentar hablar más fuerte. Bueno, les voy a compartir la pantalla en estos momentos. Un segundo. Y bueno, lo primero que me gusta aclarar siempre es hacia dónde vamos cuando hablamos también de diplomacia científica, hacia dónde vamos y hacia dónde vamos desde nuestro rol como científicos. Y desde nuestro rol como científicos, efectivamente,
And
vamos
as
a hacer brokers
scientists,
de conocimiento. Como les
we
decía,
will be
podemos aportar
knowledge
mucho desde
brokers.
estos roles, ¿no?
We can make a
Una
lot
de
of
las preguntas era,
contributions.
bueno, ¿cómo podemos aportar al
Someone
tema
asked
de
about
recomendaciones de políticas públicas? Y bueno,
how
aquí
we
hay muchos
can
temas que podemos hacer. Lo primero es proveer información
support public
basada
policy
en
making.
evidencias.
First of all, we can
Nosotros estamos
provide
participando, cada
evidence-based
uno de nosotros desde las
information.
diferentes
We're doing
áreas en las que
science
estamos
from
involucrados.
the
Y la
different
idea es
areas
poder
where we work.
proveer la información, los datos que tenemos por medio de nuestra
And the
ciencia
idea is to
para
provide
informar
the
a los
data
policymakers, ¿no?
we
Igualmente,
have
muy
to help
importante es
policymakers.
facilitar desde nuestro rol como científicos, sumándonos
And
incluso
also, we would
a
like
redes,
to
asociaciones, ¿no? Y que también
join
este knowledge
other
hub que ustedes describen es
associations
importante que
and
podamos ser
this major
ese knowledge
knowledge
hub,
hub at
¿no?
the
Para poder
IAI
facilitar ese diálogo entre
so that
distintas
we can
actores. Me encantaría
facilitate
resaltar
this
para mí en este
conversation.
proceso el rol del
Also,
IAI
we
también
need to
como un
remember
broker
the role of
entre
the
lo que es
IAI as a
ciencia,
broker
los
between
policymakers y sobre todo las
science,
relaciones internacionales en
policymakers,
América Latina y para las
and
Américas. Me parece
international
que este ha
relations
sido
in Latin
tremendo en esta
America
parte porque en el marco de la
and the
comunidad
Caribbean.
académica tenemos
The
siempre
role
esa
has been
interfaz
very
presente y es muy importante
has been
para nosotros que
essential
estamos en un rol científico, ¿no? Y en un rol
because
de
we are
dirección también, como en el caso mío,
scientists.
poder
I am a
participar
manager, and it's very
en
important for me
estos
to be able
diálogos,
to
porque al final
participate in this
estos son
conversation
diálogos de saberes, ¿no? Cada uno tiene una perspectiva
because we're having a
diferente.
conversation
Y bueno,
between different
también
types of
es muy
knowledge.
importante la perspectiva
It's also very important to consider
interdisciplinar.
the inter and
El IAI también ha
transdisciplinary
apoyado mucho la
perspective.
perspectiva transdisciplinar cuando hablamos de
The
ejercicios de
IEA
diplomacia
has supported
científica,
the TD
incluso en los ejercicios con los
approach when it
cuales
comes to
hablaba el
science
profesor
diplomacy.
Ferguson y mis otros colegas, hemos visto la
And my
importancia de la
colleagues have
investigación
already talked about
transdisciplinar.
the importance
Hoy
of
en día
TD
ya lo
research.
sabemos, los retos van más allá de las
Nowadays,
disciplinas.
we
Y como
know that
científicos
challenges
debemos
go
presionarnos
beyond
a nosotros
disciplines.
mismos a
And as
trabajar en
scientists, we need
específicos de
to
áreas de conocimiento
work with
totalmente,
different types of
totalmente
scientists
diferentes.
from
Por eso,
different areas.
uno de los roles que debemos asumir
Therefore,
como
one of the
científicos hoy
roles
en
we
día
need
es
to
entender que la
uh,
investigación
have as
transdisciplinar
scientists
y pues hoy
is
en día también tenemos un
understanding
proceso
that
hacia la
TD
ciencia orientada por
science
misiones, ¿no? Es muy
is very
importante que tengamos
important
siempre eso en
and it
nuestro
must focus
background
on
y que las
missions.
misiones
We need
y
to
las
include
acciones
that because
transdisciplinares
missions and TD
también van a
actions
influenciar mucho esas recomendaciones para las
uh,
políticas públicas.
will also inform public policy
un
making.
rol clave para los científicos el tema del
And we
desarrollo y
believe
capacidades y cómo
the capacity
los
building
profesores
is
podemos
essential as well.
favorecer esa
And we need to
recepción y esa
see
formación de
how we
otros
can
científicos,
improve the
incluso la
participation
formación en
of other
comunidades,
stakeholders.
incluso de policy makers, ¿no? Sobre la importancia
Even
de la ciencia.
policymakers
Actualmente
about
tenemos
the
una
importance
crisis
of
mundial
science.
acerca, bueno,
Nowadays, there's a
del
world
trust in science,
crisis
¿no? De la
about
confianza en la
the
ciencia,
trusting
¿no? Entonces
science, people
nosotros como
trusting
científicos
science.
debemos poder
As
ayudar a las
scientists, we should
comunidades
be
a
able
crear
to
una
help
cultura científica,
communities
a poder entender,
create
¿no?
a
El rol de la
scientific
ciencia,
culture, to be able to
incluso
understand
más allá
that
de la escena política,
the
sino también
role of
incluso sobre las
science
comunidades
is
o la
important,
ciudadanía
even
en
beyond
general. También desde ese
policy.
rol de influencia que
We
les
need to work
comentaba,
with communities and
podemos
citizens at
aportar,
large.
¿no? Definiendo prioridades estratégicas.
We can
Muchas veces
also
nosotros tenemos una
set
lectura
strategic
tan potente de lo que
priorities.
está
Many
sucediendo dentro de un
times,
área puntual, con una situación puntual,
there
que
is a specific
nuestro rol es
situation,
necesario a la hora de
and we
definir
believe
esas
that our
prioridades.
participation
Fortalecemos las
is
comunidades,
essential,
especialmente cuando estamos conectados con
especially
equipos
when we are working
interdisciplinares
with
que van a
inter
poder
and
tener una lectura
transdisciplinary
mucho más
teams.
de prioridades estratégicas. Y lo
And
mismo desde ese
we are
rol de
able to
Senacyt,
identify
podemos diseñar,
strategic
apoyar
priorities.
en ese
And from
diseño de
that role,
políticas
we can support
efectivas,
public
incorporando
the
esa
design of
evidencia
effective
científica
public policies
que
by
es mucho más
including this
segmentado, ¿no? En
scientific
el caso de
evidence
hoy que nos convoca el
so
tema de
that
los
it's
recursos
more
naturales
targeted.
hacia
For instance,
temas
today
de
we're talking about
mayor
estuaries and
sostenibilidad
mangroves,
y
and the idea is
conservación.
to focus on
Y bueno,
sustainability and
la gente
conservation
siempre se nos
issues.
pregunta qué pueden hacer los
And people
policymakers, ¿no?
always
Cuando les
ask us
entregamos
what
documentos
policymakers can
de
do when we
recomendaciones
give them
específicas.
documents
Que ahorita también
regarding
Lucía hacía una
public
pregunta
policy
muy importante, ¿cómo
recommendations.
deben estar estructurados esos documentos?
Lucia is asking about the
¿Hacia dónde
potential
vamos con
structure
esos
of those
documentos? Lo
documents
primero
and
es
what their aim is.
entendiendo quién
First of
es
all, we
el
need to
policymaker, ¿no?
understand
Al que le voy a
who
entregar
the
este documento, qué
policymaker is,
background tiene, qué
the person
puede
that will
hacer con ese
receive this
documento.
document.
Estas son
What's the
preguntas
background? What can they do
que
with
son
this?
preguntas de fondo para
These are
nosotros como científicos cuando estamos
essential tools as
haciendo estos
scientists
documentos,
when
reflexionar
we are preparing the
sobre
documents
la salida que pueden tener
and
estos documentos.
reflecting
Igualmente, otra
about the
pregunta clave
results
que
of
nos
these
debemos hacer
documents.
es también
Also,
qué políticas existen,
we
¿no? ¿Qué
can
políticas
think
existen
about
ya en esas áreas o en
already
esa área que
existing
nosotros deseamos
policies
influenciar y cómo estas
in the area
recomendaciones
we want to
van realmente
impact
a
and
generar
how these
una
recommendations
innovación o van a
can
aportarle a las áreas
actually
de conocimiento, porque
uh,
muchas veces queremos
be
hacer
innovative or
y crear
support
documentos de
this
recomendaciones de
knowledge.
políticas
Because many
públicas sin
times we
hacer un
want to
análisis
prepare
real,
public policy
dado que las
recommendation
políticas
documents without
existentes en
truly
un área puntual y estamos generando simplemente
analyzing the
dobles
current policies.
recomendaciones o apuntando sobre algo que ya
Sometimes
existe. Entonces es
we're
muy importante también
duplicating
que podamos
efforts or
conocer lo que existe.
redoing
Y
something that
la
has been already
lo
done.
último que quiero decir sobre pues, la estructura de
And
estos documentos
finally,
es
about the
que
structure of
debemos ser
these
muy
documents,
medidos
we need
también
to be
en el largo de
very
estos documentos y
cautious
en lo
regarding the length
específico que
of
podamos
these
hacer
documents
frente a las
and how
recomendaciones de
specific
política
we can
pública.
be
Hemos visto
regarding
muchas
public
veces
policy
incluso
recommendations.
larguísimos o white
Many
papers con
times
una
we
información
see
de
very
contexto
long
demasiado
white
exagerada.
papers
Para
with
nosotros esto ha sido muy
excessive
importante a la
context
hora
information.
de la realización de estos documentos, tener la información
When we prepare
necesaria
these
para el
documents,
proceso,
we
no más
include
de la
the
información
information that
necesaria.
is needed
Incluimos siempre
and
muchas
not
veces
more than
casos,
that.
¿ok?
Many
Para
times
poder
we include
aclarar
cases so that we
ciertas
can
situaciones o ciertos
clarify
contextos,
some
pero
situations
siempre
or
ir directo
contexts,
a la
but we
recomendación de
always
política
go
pública que al
to
final
the
del día
public
es
policy
lo que
recommendation
interesa, ¿no?
directly
A estos
because
policymakers.
that's what
Y
these
bueno, los
policymakers
policymakers
are
con esto pueden
interested
hacer
in.
muchas cosas. Obviamente
Policymakers can
evaluar
do
y,
different
y
things.
ajustar
They can
las estrategias, las políticas
assess and
existentes
adapt
en los diferentes
strategies and
países.
current
También
policies
incluso,
in each
como lo
country.
comentaba Edgardo, incluso
As
también en un white
Edgardo
paper,
said,
en un policy brief anterior que hicimos
in a
de
policy
Amazonía,
brief we
teníamos
prepared some
también
time ago
incluso
on the
algunas recomendaciones
Amazonia, we
orientadas hacia una
included
mayor cooperación internacional,
recommendations
tanto de
focusing
los
on
países miembros,
international
dependiendo del
cooperation.
policymaker, la influencia que
And
tenga y el lugar
depending
en
on
el que
the
se está,
influence
se
of the
puede
policy maker or
influenciar
their position, they
estrategias
can
de
also
cooperación
influence
internacional.
international cooperation policies. I would like to invite you to download the recommendations white paper for mangroves and estuaries, and to complement what Dr. Edgardo said. How did this document come about? Well, it was the result of this dialogue between researchers, managers, and policymakers. Considering that our researchers, the ones that participated in this training in Panama, knew exactly what the situation in their countries was. And they had information provided by their own communities. Because these researchers worked hard with the communities. There were very interesting cases. And the researchers that were part of this white paper are people that work with communities and that always exchange different types of knowledge. They collect information. Therefore, this document meets the needs of the community. I would also like to highlight once again the role of the IAI regarding how these different stakeholders come together to create a document that is not just the IAI's focal points, but I think this has also impacted universities, networks, associations, because these recommendations address policymakers, but we never know who the end user will be, and which is the impact of these documents on other networks and associations. But also under this type of document, we know that these documents are having a huge impact. Edgardo has already talked about the recommendations. Please download the document. And I would also like to tell you about the recommendations we launched this year, which are very interesting to be included in a science diplomacy strategy to safeguard the Amazonia. The Amazonia is almost a global common. We're all interested in what happens to it. Of course, researchers and policymakers are interested, but many other people as well. In this document, we included recommendations about TD, scientific academic cooperation, given the joint monitoring platform, and how we should describe that interface between science and policy, also the importance of different panels, such as the one that protects the Amazonia, and also the importance of capacity building. We need to raise people's awareness, and we need to continue advancing with our researchers so that they remember their role. Thank you so much for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias, Luisa.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Clearly, both presentations have been very interesting.
Hay algunas preguntas aquí en
There
el
are some
chat,
questions in the chat.
se las voy a leer y
Let me read them out to you.
podría ser que ustedes los respondan en el
And
orden
maybe
que
you
ustedes
can
así
answer
decidan.
them in
La primera
the
de
order
ellas
you
es,
decide.
¿de qué manera pueden los ecosistemas de
How
manglares
can
como pilares de
mangrove
la biodiversidad y la
ecosystems
cultura
as
en Latinoamérica
pillars of
servir como
biodiversity and culture in
catalizadores
Latin
para una
America
diplomacia científica
act as
efectiva que promueva
catalyzers
la
to have
cooperación
effective
regional
science
y la
diplomacy that
sostenibilidad
promotes
ambiental en un
regional
contexto global
cooperation
interconectado?
and
Y
environmental
Johanna
sustainability in
Segovia
a
quiere hacer esta
global
pregunta.
interconnected context?
No sé quién
Johanna is
quisiera
asking this
empezar a
question.
responder
Who would
esta
like
pregunta.
to answer the question?
Creo que la pregunta es de diplomacia científica,
I think it's
pero
a science diplomacy
la
question.
parte técnica, la respuesta a la pregunta es las dos charlas
The answer
todas,
to the question
completas,
is, both
porque la pregunta es
presentations.
integral. y es el objetivo. Utilizamos estos ecosistemas
And that's our
precisamente
aim.
por ello,
We are
porque son
using these
ecosistemas
ecosystems
que son frágiles,
exactly
tienen un rango de
because of this. They're
distribución
fragile. They
único
have a
en nuestro
unique
planeta
distribution
y que
range in
nosotros somos
on our
afortunados de vivir en
planet.
Latinoamérica, donde
And we are
estos
so
ecosistemas son muy
lucky
diversos
to
y
live
donde
in
tenemos zonas protegidas que
Latin
podemos
America
utilizar
with
como
these
modelo de
diverse
conservación,
systems. And we
pero
can
integrando
use
desde
them
luego
as a
la
conservation
transdisciplinaridad y
model, but
utilizando
also
la diplomacia
include
científica
TD
como
science
herramienta
and
clave
use
para que
science
esto no quede
diplomacy
en
as a
ciencia
key
básica o ciencia
tool
aplicada en un
so
documento que
that
solo leemos nosotros,
this is not
sino que
just
vaya
a
hacia una
document
gobernanza
that only
efectiva
we
y al
can
final del
read.
día
We
con
need
un
this to be used
beneficio
for effective
sostenible,
governance
económico,
because
social
we
y
want to
cultural
have a
para las
social,
comunidades que
cultural, and
habitan
economic
los estuarios y
benefits
los manglares de
that
Latinoamérica.
support the
Supongo que Luisa
people
quiere agregar
living
la
in
parte más de diplomacia.
mangroves and estuaries in
Quería
Latin
agregar
America.
algo, un poco un tema de liderazgo científico. Y es nuevamente lo que les decía en la presentación, el rol
Regarding
y esa
scientific
interacción
leadership,
del
as
científico
I was
con la
saying
comunidad.
before, we need to remember
Muchas
the
veces
importance
en los
of
escenarios, hay veces que la comunidad está
scientists,
presente
their
y
role,
la
and
comunidad no
their
está
interaction
presente
with the
a la comunidad no
community.
escucha a la
Sometimes
comunidad.
communities
Entonces, ¿quién representa a la
participate
comunidad?
in drafting these
¿Quién
documents,
representa los intereses
other
de la
times they
comunidad?
don't.
¿Mm?
If they
Entonces
don't
acá,
participate,
la
who
pregunta
represents
es,
the
¿quién
community?
es? ¿Ok?
So
Muchos
the
dirían, no,
question
pues
is, or many people
simplemente
might
puede ser el
say,
representante de la escena política. Así es, eso puede
it
ser.
might
Pero
be
¿qué
a
pasa cuando
political
el representante
representative,
de
for
la escena
instance,
política
okay, or a
realmente no está
politician.
totalmente
But what
involucrado con la
happens if that
comunidad?
person is not
Realmente
fully
no conoce
involved with the
tanto de la
community
comunidad y sus
and they are
necesidades
not
como lo
that
conoce usted.
familiar with the community
Entonces,
and
hay
its
un término
needs
que en
as
estos
you
diálogos
are?
y en estas conversaciones está indirectamente
So, who
representando
is
a la universidad.
indirectly
Ustedes,
representing the
perdón,
university?
a la comunidad,
Sorry,
ustedes.
the community.
¿Ok?
It's you,
Entonces,
scientists, who
ese es
are
un mensaje
representing the
muy
society
claro que me
indirectly.
gustaría dejar,
And that's a
porque
clear
muchas veces
message that I would like to share
como
with you.
científicos no
As
entendemos el impacto
scientists,
que
many
puede
times
tener
we don't understand
nuestra
the
visión
potential impact of
frente a una
our
comunidad puntual en
perspective
las Estuaries.
when it
Entonces,
comes to a
nosotros
specific
trabajamos de la mano de
community.
comunidades y nos conocen. Si llevamos años
We
estando
work
en el
with
mismo plano,
communities.
comemos con
We've been
ellos,
there for
trabajamos con ellos,
so
nos
long.
importan ellos.
We
Obviamente, cuando
we
estamos en
care
estos
about them.
escenarios, ¿ok?
So given
Nosotros al
those
final del día nos
scenarios,
volvemos
at the end of the
representantes de la
day, we
comunidad y eso es lo que
become
tenemos que
community
entender y valorar
representatives. And it's something that we
en los
need to
espacios de
remember
diálogo virtual.
when it comes to
Muchas gracias.
these
Yo solo quiero
knowledge
hacer mención de que este white
spaces.
paper tiene 19 autores,
This white
autoras.
paper includes
Entonces, bueno, la
19
representación
authors.
indirecta de estas comunidades, pero
So
también de la academia en sí,
these
¿no? De que
communities
toda
and the
esta red de
academia
relaciones que
are
cada autor y autora tiene
represented
atrás, bueno, está de alguna manera
because all the
representada
authors'
en esta
networks
white
are
paper.
also represented in this white paper.
Ahora les leeré la pregunta que nos hace José Prieto. ¿Cuál es el
José
potencial rol de
Prieto
los
asks,
ministerios
which
de
is the
ciencia para
potential role
promover
of
espacios de
ministries of science to
asesoramiento científico
promote
con los diferentes
scientific
sectores,
advice
por ejemplo,
spaces
otros
with different
ministerios?
sectors, for instance,
No
other
sé aquí
ministries?
si el colega Franklin Morales podría
Maybe Franklin
compartirnos su experiencia.
Morales would like to
Sí, claro, muchas
answer the
gracias.
question.
Tal vez abordando nada más un tema de la pregunta anterior y luego contestando esta. Creo que la forma en la que hay que pensar esto es que tiene
I
que ser un
think
trabajo
that
conjunto desde el
this
inicio.
needs to be joint work from the
Es muy
beginning.
difícil hacer un trabajo y
It's
después
very
tratar de ver cómo
difficult
este trabajo va a afectar política pública.
to
Si desde
do
el
some
inicio
work
no se
and
está
see how it's going
integrando
to
cuál
affect
es la
public
demanda que
policy.
existe
We need to
en los tomadores de decisiones, qué tipo de
include
decisiones están
the
buscando
demands of
tomar en este
decision makers
momento, qué
from the
tipo de
beginning. We
decisiones
need
requieren
to know
evidencia
what type of
científica,
decisions require
incluso en temas de
scientific
diplomacia
evidence.
científica, qué
And
tipo de
even when it comes
foros,
to
qué tipo de
science
discusiones están
diplomacy, what kind
sucediendo
of
y que son
fora
críticas
or
en las que se debe
debates are
incidir.
taking
Entonces, creo
are
que ahí
taking
el tema
place.
de los tiempos, ¿no? Los tiempos de la ciencia y los tiempos
So
de
this
la
has
toma
to
de
do
decisiones a
with
veces
different timelines for
difíciles, cómo
science, for
armonizamos
decision
esos
making.
tiempos
And
de
what
una
is
forma en que la
difficult
ciencia
is
pueda
to
responder
align these
al
times
momento que se necesita y pueda
or
responder
timelines
con
so
los
that
datos que se
science
necesitan
can provide
y puede
timely
responder a preguntas que ya
answers with the
existen,
necessary
preguntas
data, and
que se
also
están
answer
tratando de
questions
contestar,
that
pero que se
already
están
exist
contestando sin
that we are
datos
trying to
o sin
answer,
ciencia.
but
Creo que
that are being answered
eso
without
es algo
resorting
crítico en
to
cómo se
science.
debe
I
o
think
considero tal
that's
vez que se debe
essential.
considerar y desde la Senacyt lo que estamos viendo también el tema del
And
asesoramiento científico
also at
con los
Senacyt, we
diferentes
work
ministerios es
with,
precisamente
we
eso, cómo se
provide
establece
scientific
un diálogo
advice to different
interinstitucional,
ministries. It's
intersektorial,
important to
en el que
have
vamos entendiendo hacia
interinstitutional
dónde se están guiando las
conversations
prioridades políticas del
so
momento y
that we
luego
can
entonces
focus
asociarnos a
on
la comunidad
political
científica y ver
priorities
de qué forma podemos
and
agregar
then talk to
valor a
scientific
esta decisión.
community to see how we can add
La
value to the
ciencia no
decision.
necesariamente va a ser percibida como valiosa solo por
Science is not
la ciencia
necessarily
tiene
perceived
que
as valuable just because it's
trabajar ese
science.
espacio de cómo
Science
otorgamos valor.
needs
Y en el
to
tema, por ejemplo,
add
de
value
la
to what
pregunta
it
inicial de
does.
cómo aseguramos
Regarding the initial question
que esto
about
eventualmente se
how we
traduzca
ensure
en
that this or of
aprovechones de la
this
evidencia científica, creo que también
leads
la
to making the
pregunta
most of
hacerse
scientific
con tanto
evidence,
interés
I think that we should ask
bien sería so
ourselves,
what,
so what?
y qué si lo que dice la evidencia.
As
¿Cómo
in,
conecta eso con
so
algo
what
adicional? ¿Cómo
regarding what
conecta no solo
evidence
con la
is
comunidad
the evidence is
costera,
saying?
sino
How
tal
do
vez
we
con la comunidad más
scale
amplia, con
this
el
up?
país, con la
How do we
región? Y
connect it
entonces
to
ahí
the
en
larger
distintos niveles
community,
vamos a
the
tener
country, the region?
tomadores de
And at
decisiones
different
que están
levels, you will have
conectados con
decision
este
makers
y
that
qué
are connected
sucede
to this so what?
qué pasa si estos ecosistemas
Or
no
what
los
happens if
protegemos, qué
these
pasa con las
ecosystems are
comunidades,
not
qué pasa
protected? What
con
happens
el
with
país a
communities?
nivel y qué
What
pasa con la
happens with
región.
the
Y eso
country?
qué
What
significa.
happens with the region?
Creo que a distintos niveles los
I
tomadores de decisiones
think
van a tener
that
distintas
decision
prioridades,
makers at different
distintos
levels, we
lentes
have
con los que
different
están abordando los
priorities,
problemas y hay que ser
different
lo suficientemente
perspectives,
flexibles
and we
para
need to be
entender
flexible
que
enough
nosotros
to
tenemos que hacer esa
understand
interpretación
that we
para
need
los
to
tomadores de
interpret
decisiones.
all
Nosotros somos
this
los
to
que tenemos
help
que hacer ese
decision
vínculo y ese
makers. We
enlace y esa
need to
traducción
make
en
this
la que
liaison and translate
podemos identificar
these
exactamente
contents
qué parte de la
because
ciencia,
we can truly identify
qué esfuerzo de
which
la ciencia es el que es más relevante
part
desde el
of
punto de vista
science
actual.
is
No
actually
hemos tenido un
relevant at a
proceso
given time.
constante, creo que el rol
So it's an
definitivamente es
ongoing
encontrar esos
process.
espacios,
I
quiénes
think
son
the
los
idea is
champions,
to
tal vez de las
find
instituciones de
these
gobierno,
spaces,
iniciar
which are the
procesos
champions within government
de
institutions,
poca fricción y luego de
and
ahí, pues obviamente tratar de
we
ir
should
ampliando
start
la
from
influencia de ese aparato
easier
científico en la misma.
assignments and then make the most of science in this
Muchísimas
regard.
gracias,
Thank
Franklin.
you.
Sí, Marcela,
Thank you
adelante.
so much,
Sí,
Franklin.
aportar
Marcela.
también a este diálogo
I would
y
also like
reforzar la
to
idea de la
say
importancia de los asesores
that
científicos. Todo lo que hemos discutido en
scientific
este
advisors are very
webinario,
important.
si la
Um,
ciencia hay una gran
in
producción,
this
hay
webinar, we
conocimientos
have
sólidos
said
y los
that
tomadores de
we need
decisión
solid
realmente necesitan
science
más
and decision
evidencia
makers need more
para poder
evidence
tomar
to
mejores
be
decisiones
able
en
to
base
make
a estos conocimientos
better
sólidos.
decisions based
Pero
on
un
this
rol muy
knowledge.
importante es quién puede apoyar a
There's something
sintetizar,
very
a
important.
buscar la
Who can
información, a
help us
comunicar de
summarize
manera que sea
information, search
comprensible
for the
por muchos tomadores
information,
de decisión que necesariamente no
adapting
son
it so that
científicos,
it's under,
sino
so that
incluso
decision
que a veces no
makers
tienen los
can
tiempos
understand
para
it.
poder
They might not be
entender todo
scientists.
el
They might not
conocimiento
have the
científico sobre
time
los
to
temas en los cuales
understand
tienen que
scientific
tomar
knowledge
decisiones.
fully because they need to make
Así
several
que nuestra
decisions.
gobernanza en los países de
Therefore,
América Latina
our
no hay
governance
muy
in
bien
Latin American
definido roles de
countries
asesores científicos
doesn't have a
para
clearly
sostener
defined scientific
ese
advisor
trabajo
roles
en los diferentes ministerios, mismo a nivel
in
nacional,
our
provincial o
ministries,
municipal.
even at
Entonces, la
different government
importancia de
levels.
tener más
Therefore,
asesores,
it's
tener también
essential
más
to have
claridad
more
en su
advisors
función en
and
diferentes
more
niveles del
and
gobierno y no
know what
solo
their roles
incluyendo
are at
también
different
el
government
legislativo,
levels
el
in
judiciario, todos los
parliament, in the
gobernantes, todos tomamos
judiciary,
decisiones,
not just the
muchos temas
executive
sin
branch.
evidencia, sin
Many people make
conocimientos que realmente
decisions, sometimes
justifiquen en
without
base
evidence or without
a lo que
knowledge.
ya sabemos de la ciencia. En ese sentido,
Um,
el
in
IAI,
this sense,
considerando
the
este
IAI
desafío, lanzamos hace 4
uh,
años el programa de
launched
formación de asesores
four
científicos,
years
que se dice
ago
en
the
inglés Science, Technology and
science,
Policy, ¿no?
technology,
Y hemos
and
formado, hemos
policy
trabajado con
advisors
casi
course.
90
And we
fellows
have worked
de
with
ciencia
over
políticas en
almost
15
90
países
science and policy fellows from 15 countries in Latin America, including also the United States and Canada. It has been an innovative program in our region because it has brought together scientists who are really interested in using the science to support decision-making processes. But it's a two-way street. It's not just science for policy, it's also policy for science. To understand the value of science and to find the necessary mechanisms to properly use science and to respect decision-making timelines. It's not an easy job, it's a huge challenge, but we need to start by training advisors and by including these science policy brokers and different government agencies at every decision-making level so that science can actually reach decision-making processes. So if you're not familiar with the STEP program, I can tell you that it has been quite successful because it has helped mobilize decision makers, and they are trained in working with decision makers, and this is a huge role in the conversation we've had throughout this webinar. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcella. So we have some more questions in the chat, but we don't have more time to answer the questions. But we would like to thank you for your interest. We suggest you follow us on our social media, the IAI and DiploCientifica, so that you can learn about future conversations about this white paper and regarding specific questions about the white paper and the STEP program. And now I would like to give the floor to Bran. Thank you so much for being here.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos y todas por estar
Thank you
acá y
so much,
acompañarnos.
everyone, for being
La
here
verdad,
and supporting us.
fue una charla
It has
súper
been
importante, algo de lo
a
que tenemos que
major
hablar
conversation
mucho,
and
hay mucha
something we
región
need to
y
truly address
mucho
in
para
the
aprender
region.
y compartir,
We
por
have so
supuesto, el
much to
conocimiento
learn and share,
sobre la
and we
diplomacia
need to share
científica,
our
sobre
knowledge
su
about
poder,
science
sobre
diplomacy,
sus impactos
its
y, por
power,
supuesto,
its
sobre todas las
impacts, and
actividades
of
que hace el
course
Centro
about
de
all
Diplomacia
the
Científica de IAI.
activities
Así
implemented
que
by
con
the
esto
IAI Science Diplomacy Center.
me despido
Well, thank
y
you
les
so
deseo
much
muy
for
buenas tardes.
everything, and I
Hasta
wish
luego.
you a great afternoon. Thank you so much.